So in that last video I did, I talked about some of the open world games that I've been playing and enjoying on the Steam Deck. Now, a lot of these I'd actually already played previously, so it felt fun to kind of do a contrast and compare and kind of figure out, okay, are these games going to play as well as I remember them on consoles in this new, well, basically console that I have, this handheld PC that is the Steam Deck. And I ended that list on Elden Ring. Elden Ring was a natural choice for that list because, again, I spent about 300 hours playing Elden Ring. I've beaten it at this point, I've helped some friends beat it at this point, and I've spent so much time on PlayStation 5 and Series X that I really was not sure if I was going to dive in and buy it for a third time on the Steam Deck, but ultimately I caved and did it, rationalizing that, you know what, I already know it's an amazing game, why wouldn't I want to play it on the go? So what I want to talk about in today's video is just what that handheld experience has been like for Elden Ring, but then also some concerns or drawbacks, or maybe I guess you would just say hesitations that I have about recommending it on the Steam Deck, depending on whether or not it's your first time with Elden Ring. But I tell you what, let's just go ahead and dive in first and talk about what the experience has been like so far. And when I first started to dive into Elden Ring on the Steam Deck, one of the first things that I noticed in the character creation screen was that the text is really small, not unmanageably so. It's not completely unreadable, but it was a little bit difficult to make out, or maybe I'm just getting to that age where I probably need glasses and haven't done it yet. But nonetheless, it is something you will notice, particularly if you're coming from the console versions. And something else you'll definitely notice about Elden Ring on the Steam Deck if you're coming to it from the PS5 or the Series X or something like that, is that the load times are noticeably longer. I'm not going to say that they're approaching like PS1 levels of agony or anything when you're trying to wait for things to come back up, but if you've spoiled yourself on the PlayStation 5 and you're expecting those same sort of ultra-fast load times on the deck, you might be a little bit disappointed. But once you've wrapped up character creation and actually loaded in for the first time and then work your way through the tutorial cave and eventually out to Limgrave proper, you'll find that it is running pretty smoothly and that their claims that it's a verified title are totally true. However, I will say to get it to run smoothly definitely required some visual sacrifices. You'll definitely see things like texture detail and draw distance has been reduced a little bit, and that kind of makes sense, right? The Steam Deck is not something that has power on par with the PlayStation 5 or the Series X. It's more akin to like a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 4 Pro, so it only makes sense that you're not going to have as rich of a visual experience, technically speaking, as you would from next-gen consoles. But I have to say that despite the reduced visual flair on the Steam Deck compared to, again, next-gen consoles, it really doesn't do much to diminish the awe-inspiring scale of the lands between. Sure, you might not notice as much vivid or fine details off in the distance as you would on, say, its console counterparts, but nonetheless, these environments are still absolutely striking, and very little of that is lost in the translation down to the smaller screen. Now, where it does become a little bit more noticeable is in maintaining a consistent frame rate. For the most part, if you're just running around the lands between and you see the occasional enemy here and there, or if you're engaging in a very, singularly focused boss battle, the frame rate will mostly keep pace in the 30 to 40 FPS range. However, I did notice that in instances where there are a lot of particle effects on screen, or if you're out in the wild and you encounter those large roaming packs of enemies, which might be, 2 dozen strong, or, if it's like the giants that are like pulling the carriage through Limgrave or something like that, I did notice the frame rate took a dive there, sometimes down to as low as 25 or 26 frames per second, which was not exactly ideal. Still playable, but you'll definitely notice it. But visual fidelity and frame rate aside, how does it actually feel to use the Steam Deck's standard controls in a game like Elden Ring versus, say, a standard controller that you would use for the Series X or the PlayStation 5? I would say pretty great. And that's for a couple of key reasons. One, if you're somebody who just can't break the habit of claw gripping the controller, and like me, you find yourself putting your thumbs on the sticks and then sort of hooking your right index finger up to the face buttons to perform certain actions, because those face buttons are so close to the edge of the controller and not sort of recessed in like you'd see on a standard controller, it is easier to do this maneuver. But that's the other great thing about controls on the Steam Deck is if you can retrain your brain and your muscle memory from how you've played Souls games previously and take advantage of those rear paddles on the system, it could, in theory, completely negate your need to ever do the claw grip again. I will say most of the time I was able to achieve this using the rear L4, L5, R4, and R5 buttons. Wow, it's really weird to say after only saying L1, 2, and 3, for example. But at the same time, I still caught myself now and again falling back into gripping the controller in exactly that way. I guess old habits die hard. But assuming you can get acclimated to this control scheme, remapping the 4 face buttons to the 4 rear paddles is definitely a more efficient way to play it, and it does make sure that you can maintain finer camera control, which is especially helpful if you're going to go up against like some of the more giant bosses in the game. I won't spoil any for anybody who's not made it to certain areas of Elden Ring yet, but you probably know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have these big, beefy, gigantic bosses that you have to go up against, and it's not always easy to see what is the next attack they're going to wind up with. So making sure you can maintain camera control, especially during some of the more harrowing boss fights, is definitely a win, and it's a huge advantage, I think, to playing on the Steam Deck. So from a visual and performance standpoint, it's definitely passable. From a control standpoint, I think it has a distinct edge, But there are some concerns that I have about playing Elden Ring in the handheld format, one of which would be the rage problem. Now, I can't remember the last time I threw a controller. I was probably like 6 or 7 years old. It's rare that a game will make me just rage quit or flip out so hard that I feel the need to physically throw an object. But if you are the kind of person who's prone to those kind of fits of rage, maybe the Steam Deck isn't the best place to play Elden Ring, because it's one thing to chuck like a $60 controller across the room. It's another thing to chuck a $400 handheld PC, which obviously would not be a very cool thing to do. I'm just saying it's something that kind of occurred to me as I was struggling with the boss when I was playing it, is that if you're somebody who is prone to, again, this sort of fits of rage, maybe this isn't the best way for you to play Elden Ring. Maybe I'm being crazy, or maybe that's not a legitimate concern, but it was something I definitely considered as I got frustrated with a couple of boss encounters myself. But I think the more practical and pressing concern that I have about playing a game as big and lush as Elden Ring in this format is battery life. Now, if you have a backup battery like the ones that I've mentioned in previous videos, then you can keep your deck running for like 6 hours at a time, you'll probably be fine. But if you're going to be playing it in handheld mode, you're really not going to get much more than about an hour and a half in Elden Ring. I tried to modify the settings a little bit, and I think the most I got was a little over 2 hours, but by and large, this is a massive game, and again, while it's not technically the most demanding game that I've played on the system so far, it's demanding enough that it definitely chews through that battery at a rapid rate. And the last thing that you want to do is be in the middle of a big boss fight where you might just be on the verge of squeaking out a victory, and then find that the system shuts off, or you have to go running and try to find a power outlet, or just relocate everything, especially in a game like Elden Ring, where you can't really pause the game. I mean, I think technically there are ways to pause it, but you know what I mean. There's no true pause function that's built into it. But again, the last thing you want to worry about when you're in the middle of a vicious fight with somebody like Radahn, where you're just praying that you can shave off that last sliver of health and secure a victory, is whether or not your game's going to shut off in the middle of it. So all this being said, would I actually recommend Elden Ring on the Steam Deck? I would say yes and no. If you're already a fan of Elden Ring and Souls games and you just want to be able to have like the Dark Souls sort of brutal combat experience on the go whenever you want, or you just want to like hone your skills for like an hour or so before bed, go for it. It's not going to be as visually arresting as what you would get from like a beefier gaming rig or a next-gen console, but if you're really mostly concerned about the gameplay and you just want that sweet Souls-like experience at the drop of a hat, you can definitely have fun with Elden Ring on the Steam Deck. But if you've never played Elden Ring before, would I recommend it? I don't know that I would. Now, if the Steam Deck is your only way to play it, then yes, I would say you should go for it, because Elden Ring's an incredible game, and I think everybody should experience it. But if you're somebody who has other ways to play it, like a beefier gaming rig or a next-gen console, I think it would be an experience better enjoyed there. Especially if this is like your first Souls-like experience, you're already going to have enough of a fight ahead of you, just in terms of like learning boss mechanics and really just the feel and the way, these games are played, period, that you don't want to have to like fight graphic settings in addition to that, or worry about battery, or really have any other sort of friction or barrier that would discourage you from playing it. These games are so difficult that historically they do plenty fine in putting off a lot of new players from continuing their journey in a Souls-like game, so I don't think Elden Ring really needs the extra help. So again, if you have access to play it on another system, I would definitely do it there. But if the only option you have is the Steam Deck, I still think it's worth playing, but just know I do think you'll have some additional hurdles to contend with. But hey, this is just one guy's opinion. What about you? Whether you're an Elden Ring newcomer or a complete veteran, what do you think about the Elden Ring experience on Steam Deck? Is that where you would recommend the newcomer try it first? Or do you believe, like I do, that they should play it on a beefier gaming rig or like a next-gen console, and that would be the best way to experience the game? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. As always, thanks for watching the videos. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.